And welcome back to the Warwick F1 podcast. We are doing today the the Azerbaijani Grand Prix at Baku. Not a classic, fair to say, because we're filming this on the bank holiday. It's going to be a bit of a different format. We've decamped to one of the rooms on campus. We're just going to be discussing the race today. As I say, not the most interesting. Obviously, I'm here with Chinmay as ever. I'm here with Will and Ini as well, and yeah, we may as well get started with obviously what we're giving the race out of 10. Chinmay, do you want to start?
2. I'm going to give 1 bonus point for the fact that Checo won as a Red Bull fan, and another one for the fact that Ferrari actually had a good weekend for once.
Yeah, I know, they didn't do anything wrong.
Exactly, it's so nice.
First time I did not have to add to that list, which I'm very happy about.
Well, how did you feel that they didn't do anything wrong?
I was just relieved. As soon as Leclerc crossed the line for his first podium of the season, I was like, they can't mess this up now. I was half expecting like a post-race penalty for like lack of fuel or something.
Where you just saw like side spinning.
Yeah, or just like
just
take him out before he can even get to Park Verme. That would sum it up. But
yeah.
No, it was nice. They got the double stack sorted. They didn't get caught out by a safety car for once. Yeah, I mean, It was a better weekend.
So does that move the race up for you, or?
No, I think it's a 1 for me, because how can you have more overtakes in a sprint race a third of the length than the main race that's 51 laps? It was just boring.
It was really dull. I mean, what are you giving it?
Yeah, I'm going with Chinmay. I'm going for a solid 2. Primarily based on the fact that it was nice to see a different weekend format. I think, obviously it's going to be tweaks made, but like just seeing like actual like competitive sessions on each day, whether or not they were the most exciting, I think at least quali kind of kept you on your seat a little bit. So I'm giving a point for that, and also a point for the fact that it seems like we finally have some kind of inter-team battle for drivers' championship, and that Checo win, like Chinmay said, that gets the other point for me for the 2 out of 10 overall. So
yeah, I think I'd probably give it a 2 as well. It just was not an interesting race at all. Sometimes,
Quite comfortably the worst race of the season so far.
Yeah. I think that will be bottom 3 for the season.
Definitely.
Probably joined by the Monaco Grand Prix.
I honestly think Monaco will be better, because I think it will at least have some suspense the whole way through. There will be 2 cars following each other for the lead at some point. This just had Checo like 4 seconds ahead for the last 20 laps, and there was never really any threat of that changing.
Yeah, I mean, we may as well start with the Red Bulls. Obviously, so far ahead again. I think they were. What was Perez's gap to Leclerc by the end? Was
3 seconds,
was it? Was it over 20 again?
Yeah,
they could have made a pit.
He was like 20 to Verstappen. Leclerc was 20 to Verstappen, and Verstappen was like 3 seconds to.
Yeah. So obviously Red Bull again dominating the rest of the grid, but this time Sergio Perez coming out on top.
Yeah.
Did get fortunate with the safety car. Verstappen pitting just before and then dropping behind Perez. But even before that, Perez was coming up on the back of Verstappen. It was, I think the gap was about 7 tenths just before the safety car was called. So again, Perez proving his worth at street circuits and showing that he really can drive around those tracks.
Yeah, and I think especially this is one of his strongest tracks as well. I mean, we'll go back to 2021 before the whole finale. Even Checo was actually not far behind Verstappen even 2021, when that was the year when there was such a big gap between Hamilton, Verstappen, and the rest of the grid. I think it was one of the few races where Checo was actually to keep up with Verstappen, and Lewis was struggling to get past Checo. I think, which was quite awkward, because especially with the Merc superior straight line speed that year as well. So I think, but hopefully, I'm going to stay on that hype train until eventually about 5 races time. Verstappen already has like a 50-point lead in the championship, but hopefully we can get some sort of a fight.
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously skeptical. I think I made it clear last week. Skeptical about Perez being able to challenge Verstappen, but there was at no point after Perez got into the lead where Verstappen even looked like challenging for the win. It was very, very much the gap was between about 1-2 seconds until Perez sort of drew out a bit more of a gap at the end. I mean, Will, do you think that maybe Perez has a chance, or again, is it just sort of because of the street circuits that he's so good on?
Yeah, I think he's got a good chance, don't get me wrong. I think Max kind of acknowledged that he was the better driver of the weekend. Like, his team radio after the race, his race engineer seemed to be like, oh, don't worry, things didn't go your way. And Max was like, you know what, it's fine. And even in the cool-down room afterwards, he was saying, oh, it happened to you last year, like, it's fine, like, you probably would have won anyway. I think we didn't say that, but I think that was kind of the message that he was conveying. I think the circuits have suited him a lot so far. We've had 3 street circuits, and the one that wasn't, Max was very, very far ahead of Checo. It'll be interesting to see when we get to somewhere like Spain how he copes there, but I think for now, if he keeps up how he's doing, then we could have a close title fight.
Yeah, and obviously, we've got Miami coming up, another, I guess, technically street circuit, and Monaco in a few races' time as well, definitely a street circuit there. If Perez can hang in there, maybe even take those wins, that puts the pressure on Verstappen, and if Verstappen makes those mistakes, especially we look to maybe Monaco, if you make a mistake in Monaco practice or even qualifying, you're at the back of the grid and it's very difficult to overtake there.
Yeah, I feel like the tracks have obviously suited Perez, and going forward it does seem like, especially like the next like upcoming races, this is kind of the crunch time for Checo to kind of like get an early lead on Verstappen, kind of exploit where he's going to be good, because we know when Verstappen has one of those races where he breaks out of that DRS and he just kind of does his own thing, manages his tyres, he'll run away with it. So I feel like there's going to come a point where I think with Verstappen just being the better overall like rounded driver, when it comes to more conventional circuits, and you do see Verstappen kind of eking out that advantage that he has, for Checo to have that kind of like fallback on some kind of points like lead that he could have in the first half of the season, I think that's going to be really important to him. And you could kind of tell as well after the whole Baku race, just his like team radio back alone, he just seemed like so like enthusiastic about it, just like, you know, congratulating just how he's been doing, how his team's been performing, and he genuinely believes that he can take it to Max this year. So, you know, it'll be exciting to see how it does pan out overall.
Yeah, and we'll move over to the other half of the Red Bull garage, and Max Verstappen had quite an interesting weekend, and we'll start off with the big story that came out of Saturday, and that was with the sprint race and the collision between George Russell and Max Verstappen, and obviously all the reactions to that, especially from Verstappen's side, insulting George Russell in just after the post race, just after they parked their cars. I mean, what were your takes on that? I thought it was really interesting, obviously, what some of the pundits on Sky said, and what some of the reaction on Twitter was, that it seemed to be that Max likes to race hard but doesn't like to be raced hard, and the reaction was perhaps that Max was being a little bit hypocritical.
Yeah, no, I think the whole thing about Max not wanting to be raced, I'll probably argue against that. I think Max was more angry for the fact that, you know, it was a pretty ambitious move and it didn't go wrong for him, and the fact that Max ended up with quite a substantial hole in the side pod that pretty much ruined his entire sprint race. I think it was more that sparked the fury, and I think this is just a textbook Max response to how he responds to being raced. So,
yeah, I think I'd agree. I think had it just been that he was pushed wide, he probably would have let it go, and had he managed to get past Leclerc, I think he probably would have been, you know what, that's fine. But I think ultimately he lost a World Championship point from it, at least, which we know from 2021 that can always come into play near the end. But I think it was an interesting reaction. I wouldn't have gone as far as he did, but I can see why he was so annoyed, because he was ultimately losing between half a second and a second of that because of that large chunk out the side of his car.
Yeah, it was bigger than I thought it was. One of the Red Bull mechanics did a Shining reference with here's Johnny putting their face through, but you could feel your whole fist in there. I mean, the damage was a lot bigger than maybe the reaction anticipated. And do you think that possibly or maybe compensates for why Max reacted in that way?
I mean, you can definitely see it like that. I mean, it wasn't just a run-of-the-mill kind of like slight like tire rubbing or grazing. It was a substantial like performance loss on a part of a car that effectively gives Red Bull one of its like greatest strengths, its side pod design, its efficiency that it has in that area. And I think it does justify why he was kind of angry in that aspect, but I think he also kind of did tone it down. I think he always knew in the back of his mind that his car is still insane, and that kind of goes to show that even with that substantial damage, he wasn't too far off Leclerc either in the sprint race. I feel like he would have taken some solace from it. I feel like if this was a championship where, the field is much closer together and there was potential threat of him from this incident losing more positions than he had done in the sprint race, or like where he didn't lose it, but then he could have got, I feel like he would have acted in a much worse manner. So I feel like he was justified, but I also think he was slightly tame in his reaction. But it's just based off the fact that he knew with the damages he could still get the position that he was in currently.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with all of you there. I thought, for me at least, it did seem a bit of an overreaction. Like, he's finished third, not second. I appreciate, obviously, the championship can come down to fine margins. Obviously, we mentioned in 2021 they were going in to the final race level on points for Verstappen and Hamilton, but Verstappen's made a career out of passing in quite an aggressive manner. I think back to 2021 at Imola, for example, right at the start of the season, where Verstappen is on the inside, forces Hamilton over the rumble strip on the outside, and it is essentially the same thing. Obviously, there being a wall in play makes the situation quite a bit different, but for Verstappen to then come up to George Russell after the race, say what he did, when perhaps drivers who have been on the receiving end of the same thing from Verstappen have obviously been unhappy, but not like aggressively approached Verstappen. For me, it was slightly hypocritical. And then interestingly, after the actual race, when Christian Horner came on the radio and sort of commiserated Max for losing out through the safety car, I mean, can you read into that Horner's gone to Max to say, oh, Perez got lucky, rather than going to Perez and saying that, well done, you drove a great race. Obviously, there was that benefit of the safety car, but even without that, you looked to be challenging Max and you were able to hold him off throughout the rest of the laps.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier. I think actually Max, especially after the main race, was a bit like, you know what, he was closing on me anyway. Like, I'm not that worried. I think because ultimately that was on him. Like, he could have said no. Like, he knew the yellow flags were there as well. So it is partly his decision to pit or whatever. And I think that it's just Horner and his race engineer kind of just making sure that he's not coming out saying anything silly on the radio. But I don't think it was too much of a problem to Max. I think he, as I said before, he was like, you know what, it's happened to Checo, it's happened to him, it happens to everyone at some point. I think he's just glad that he only lost 7 points from it rather than, say, 15 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? Do you think that Horner, do you think that we've been saying over the last few weeks that, like, Verstappen's been maturing at the front of the grid, he's driving really well, and then he sort of regresses a little bit, going back into maybe some of his old ways back in 2018, 2019, when he was that really aggressive driver. Do you think that maybe Christian Horner and Red Bull were recognising that, just coming on the radio saying, it's all right, Max, obviously you were a bit unlucky, but it is just one race and we can move on from it?
Yeah, I think it is just racing at the end of the day. Luck plays a massive factor into everything. And we've still got, 18 races to go in the season? So I think it's still, I would say it's still too early to tell about, the true pecking order. I would still say give another race or two for that. And then to find out who the real true pecking order is, who is really going to be the top performers this season in general, as a general note only. But I think because it's so early on in the season, I don't think they're going to care too much. Plus, Red Bull it's way too they're very 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 comfortable at the moment.
Yeah.
They know they by far got the fastest car that in pretty much all conditions, and at the end of the day, it's Horner. We know how much Horner loves Max, so I think he also got that to factor in as well.
Yeah, I think as well, like we're talking about him maybe regressing his immaturity. I think when that safety car did come in, I don't remember him coming on the radio complaining about it, whereas in the past we've seen someone like Lewis Hamilton kind of moan and be quite aggro with his team, kind of saying, oh, why have you done this? I think Max was like, he can't, unless they didn't play it, he didn't have any kind of issue with it. He was like kind of just accepted it, and I think that does show that he is kind of maturing slightly.
It helps when you have a car that can also go 30 kilometers an hour. He was so much faster than Leclerc. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I mean, on that incident, I feel like I think it's been said in the sense that like he knows that like these things happen. He knows that he has a car that's gonna sustain the championship anyway. And I feel what we kind of saw in the sense that when he was talking to like Checo about it is like, I feel he does innately know that he's got it within himself to like look past it, and he knows that he can ultimately pull it out when he needs to. He has that self-confidence in himself to do it, and I think just having that kind of goes to show why he's starting to mature a bit now, realizing that he is one of the best drivers on the grid. He knows that fact, and he knows that he's not going to let something like this phase him too much. But you know, sometimes emotions do run high. No one's completely perfect, and it might not have been the most appropriate reaction, I guess, but you can definitely see why he would be frustrated.
Yeah, and now we would just want to see a George v Max championship battle.
Yeah.
Because that would be absolute carnage. There'd be no, they'd never finish a race. Maybe bringing it to the wider rate or wider weekend, we did obviously have a new format, a format we didn't even know, or this time last week we didn't even know what it was going to be coming in to the weekend. But we saw it on Friday. We had only one practice session and then dropped straight into qualifying for the race. Saturday was the sprint day, so sprint shootout at the start of the day, and then the sprint race towards the end of the day, and then on Sunday we obviously had the race. I mean, what did you think of the format? Did you think it was a good format, better than perhaps the last sprint format, or even better than the normal format that we have?
I don't know. I kind of have mixed feelings about this new format, because I feel that there's a few ways that it's better, and quite a few ways where it did not work. I mean, the two qualifiers I think made it very confusing. Just the fact that there was, I think more to the fact that I just kept confusing like what the grid was for each race, especially when we had like the Saturday sprint quality for the Saturday, and then the Sunday's quality is before the sprint quality.
Yeah. Which
is a bit confusing. But then, I mean, I'm mindful known for trying new stuff, for new formats, but I'm probably going to go back to the old debate, like, do we really need a sprint race to begin with?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to complain. I like to watch Formula One. I think we all do. So I think the more competitive sessions there are, the better. I don't like the argument that there's too many competitive sessions. I get it's important to have practice, and I get why teams and drivers don't like it. But I think from a fan's point of view, I can kind of see why I don't know why they're trying to do it, but I like that they're adding more events to it, especially when they've had races come off the calendar, for example.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about having a whole sprint day. I think it makes it almost 2 weekends in one. I think I preferred the old format of a sprint on its own without a separate qualifying, and you still have competitive sessions on each day, so with the quali on the Friday. But I think they could do something different with that sprint race rather than adding a separate qualifying session.
Yeah. Or
make that qualifying session very distinctly different from normal qualifying. It felt a bit too samey in one weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, like we said, it is nice to have a competitive session every single day from the Friday to the Sunday. But I think like some of the main points that I took from it were, there was a good point I think Damon Hill made. He was saying no other sport really showcases the players warming up or like practicing, in the sense that obviously we get to see into a little bit of insight into like the grid order, what kind of like the shake-up's kind of going to be, but do we really need to see all 3 individual sessions? Is the kind of the point that he made. And I feel like in terms of tweaking it, I feel like it would be nice to kind of have a similar kind of like practice format, but like maybe like would it be good to kind of only show like the 3rd practice in that scenario, where kind of teams are no longer doing like long like race runs, but more on the sense that like that's kind of where you see like they're coming to the starting of like the quali like simulations, that kind of building up that interest. And also I don't agree with the park ferme rules that they put in. I feel like the fact that they froze it right after the first practice, I feel like it just kind of takes away from the job of like what kind of people do, that kind of like learning curve. And also it could very well also be a potential safety concern. Like it could be like you go in and then if there is like, for example, like there's some inherent issue with like the car that needs to be fixed, would teams be willing to take a risk of a grid penalty or the risk of like starting from the back and take that hit, or would they take the gamble of like, you know what, let's risk it and do it in the race, and then something adversely wrong happens? I feel like there should be changes made, but yeah, it was just nice to see a different kind of format and having these kind of like competitive sessions all through the weekend.
Yeah, no, I think I enjoyed it. I think all of the sessions were fair. Well, I say all of the sessions, the race wasn't, but all the other sessions were fairly interesting, good to watch. I'd probably make a few tweaks. I think I'd extend the practice session for, is it 1 hour at the moment? Yeah, what I'd do is I'd extend that to 2 hours, then put the sprint shootout on the Friday, and then do the sprint race in the morning, on the Saturday morning, then quali, then the race. Because sprint race, quali, fairly similar setups. Obviously, you're running realistically with no pit stops, running the cars nearer to their maximum potential, and then there's that continuity of you go practice, then you go the sprint, and then you go the sort of race structure with that quali and race. And I think, like you were saying, they do need to probably change the park ferme rules if they don't change the format. You look to drivers like Pierre Gasly, for example, did about 3 laps in practice, then his engine caught fire, then crashed in qualifying. He did more laps in the sprint race than he'd done in like the 2 sessions before. I think there is stuff they need to change, but it is a good start. I think I personally prefer it to the previous format. I don't know how you guys feel about it.
Yeah, I think the only issue with having the 2 big consecutive sessions on the Saturdays, like we saw with Logan Sargent, if you have a big shunt in one, you're going to miss out on the other. So I think with your idea of having sprint and then quali, I think the issue you have is drivers will be like, I don't want to ruin my qualifying session for the main race by having a shunt in the sprint. So I think they have to be careful with where they position things to make sure drivers are willing to say, you know what, if I have a crash, I can have it repaired by the next session.
I think that's just a problem with wherever you're going to put things, because when you're just putting things just close enough together, Gasly, like, he managed to get out for quali on Friday, but if he'd had a shunt in practice, maybe he doesn't get out for the actual quali. Obviously, Logan Sargent crashes in sprint qualifying, doesn't get out for the sprint race. I think that just seems to be a consequence of obviously putting a lot of competitive sessions quite close together. You're just gonna necessarily not have time if a driver ends up in the wall. I mean, would you Chinmay, would you change anything about the weekend, or perhaps do you think it's better than the previous format?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't really have any preference with the old format or this format. I mean, my major change would be to make the sprint quali a one-shot quali.
I'd probably
That's probably or at least if they're gonna connect, at least do some sort of connection between the sprint race and the main race. Do like a single quali and do something like Formula 2 where they just reverse the grid, at least partially reverse the grid or something. I know the teams, the constructors are hated so much, but then if they can just do something like that way, then they'll be nice as well.
I think I'd do one-shot quali where 20th goes first and like first goes last, obviously it's giving that benefit to the driver at the top of the championship, but they're at the top of the championship for a reason. And if you do get that rain coming in, then the drivers at the end will obviously lose out, and then we will have a interesting sprint race. I mean, Will, you were saying that it did feel too samey. Would that be something you perhaps change to change that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a thought on like a few things. Like, if they want more competitive sessions, but I know a lot of people have said they'd like the sprint or it to be like one qualifying that links to everything or whatever. Perhaps they could do Q1 and Q2 on the Friday, and then Q2 sets the grid for the sprint, and then on the Saturday morning you have a one-shot quali of the top 10 that decides the starting top 10 of the actual main race. So you get those extra sessions, but you've got your change you look for. You've got you get something decided on the Friday in the sprint grid, but you've then still got the main spectacle of that one shot kind of pressures on qualifying on the Saturday that you don't know what's going to happen, because someone makes one mistake, you end up 10th for that race.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the only real change I think I'd be looking into is giving something for like the lower like midfield teams to actually battle for. Because if we're kind of going with the sprint being it's only ever rewarding the top 8 drivers, there's only 1 point. 1 point is important, but like for a lot of the teams that are just kind of in that like 11th, 12th, like classic Yuki Tsunoda, like constant 11th, or like, round in and about the Alex Albon's another example, it doesn't really give them much to kind of fight for, more like protecting the car under the cost cap as well. They wouldn't really want to take that inherent risk. So I think definitely trying to do something that might benefit the lower down teams, kind of extend like how many points they give out to however many positions, just to kind of have more cars that are willing to kind of battle for it, kind of go for it. And that might kind of make it a bit more interesting with like maybe like a one-shot quali, because then maybe they'd be more compelled to kind of gun it from like the very beginning, knowing that like even though if they're not going to be qualifying like within like the top 8 or top 7, even if they're like within like top 12, top 11, they can still kind of see some kind of benefit from it in the race to come.
I mean, that was something Alex Albon mentioned, that if you do only give points to the top 8, it's fairly clear now that the 3 top teams have become 4 with the arrival of Aston Martin, and if each of those 2 cars finish, then that is the top 8, and we saw that in the sprint qualifying, we saw that in the race as well. I mean, points, another thing that they could change.
Yeah, you could perhaps, they don't want to make it so you lose a load of points if you're say 4th. You could just do 22-1 from first to last. So there's actually a 1 point gap. That way every position you gain something from overtaking. You don't get the 7-point bonus you get from winning on the Sunday, but you still get that extra point than your competitor. Obviously it makes it hard for say teams 7th or 8th to get those big points, but ultimately if you're finishing 7th or 8th, you wouldn't be getting the big points anyway. Yeah,
I mean, you'd always be getting, I guess second would get more points than second in the actual race.
Yeah, that's probably the only issue.
4th? Yeah, 4th would.
I think a lot of them probably would.
Yeah, I think it's just more the fact that like the advantage you gain over someone behind you is still greater in the actual race than it is in the sprint. Just like net, you'd only be gaining 1. So I guess that's kind of...
It's a difficult job. This is why we're not doing it.
I mean, half points instead.
Don't get me started.
No, thank you.
Honestly, that would have been the only way the 2021 season could have been more extreme, as if one of Verstappen or Hamilton was on half points, and the title could come down to half a point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a format. They're clearly working on it. It's only the third year. Third year. It's only the 3rd year of the format. The first race that we've had with this new format. I personally, as I've said, I prefer the new format. I think having a competitive session on every day offers more value for money for people going to the races as well, because Friday traditionally only a practice day, but now you get to see some really awesome good action, with obviously qualifying with them being at all the cars being at their unlimited potential. And where's the next sprint race?
Austria.
Oh, it's always in Austria.
Yeah, which I think the FIA got let down by Baku.
Yeah.
Everyone before the season was, oh, it's great, sprint race at Baku, more chaos, more random stuff that can happen. And now it's it was one of the worst races we've ever seen in Baku, if not the worst too.
Yeah.
And I think they put themselves in a bad situation by reducing the DRS zone. I think other than Red Bull, it wasn't a massive issue. I think if they'd left it as it was, you might have seen more late braking. Cars couldn't quite get to the point they needed to. I think had you had that, it might have made the races a bit more entertaining.
Yeah. I mean, we'll move on to the race now, and obviously why it wasn't the greatest. I think I saw one thing that was like the safety car, even though obviously it offers up that excitement, was probably at the worst possible opportunity for like strategy changes. Everyone going on pitting for mediums or pitting for hard, going off the medium tyre and then just going to the ends, and that is a thing. The tyres we've seen in the past few years, or in the start of Pirelli's era, the tyres were very, very soft. They fell off the cliff after about 10 laps. We were seeing 4-5 stop races. I think it was one year in Canada, like most cars did a 4-stop, and like some cars did a 3-stop.
I think that might have been the 4-hour Jensen.
I think I want to say 20. I want to say Canada 2012, or was
I think
like
it was when there was all
3
the weather
stops.
things and everything as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's partly why.
Yeah, but we had a 1 stop at Baku, and these were the softest tyres that they could have bought. They bought the C5 soft, C4 medium, and C3 hard, and yet the tyres could last 40 odd laps. I mean, we moved away from those really, really soft tyres in the early 2010s because of safety concerns. We've sort of seen tyre blowouts. We saw them in 2013, we saw them in 2021 as well, but like bringing the softest 3 tyres and having the hard last the entire race, that can't be the correct solution to that problem.
No, it can't be. I mean, it was a bit weird because the mediums fell off a cliff.
Yeah, even the softs in the sprint race barely.
The softs only lasted about 5 laps. I think in both races, everyone pitched off the mediums within 10 laps or so. But then then you had this large gap between the mediums lasting 10 laps and the hards lasting 40 laps.
Yeah.
I mean,
which is
like Hulkenberg took it to like 50 odd laps.
Well, Hulkenberg and Ocon did
the
the
whole
race.
race.
Yeah.
They finally died.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hulkenberg's died, and then Ocon
Ocon was
managed.
doing alright. He was holding
Yeah.
his Norris
Lord,
quite
not
comfortably.
decent.
Ocon could have finished if he would have finished where he was if he
Yeah.
hadn't have had to pit
Yeah.
because of obviously the rules. So we've been mentioning. I think this episode's going to be all around the rules and the structure of the sport. Probably says a lot about how the race wasn't the most interesting. But again, do you think something needs to change with the tyres with that 1-stop rule, or maybe even Pirelli's composition of the tyres? Do we need to go back to those really soft compounds that maybe aren't prone to obviously explosive blowouts, but do fall off a cliff quite quickly and do offer up the opportunity to 2-stop, 3-stop races, and that strategy or the strategy that would bring?
I mean, personally, I'd like to see the rainbow back of all the colours. You get so many more varieties. You would have had the super and hyper soft tyres this weekend that would have fallen off a cliff. You probably would have got a 2-3 stop race. Well, 2 or 3 stop would have been a lot more entertaining to see those drivers be able to push a lot faster, but also kind of have to look after it. You would have had a lot more strategy to it. I think they had an extra compound like the C0, or it's the new C1.
Well,
and
yeah.
the C1 was the C0, but they didn't look at any of the softer tyres.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you could have added an extra one.
Well, so how many tyres were there at the peak of the rainbow era? There was the ultra soft, the hyper soft, the super soft, the soft, the
the
medium,
the
the
hard.
hard. Well, there's
Super hard.
the super hard,
Yeah,
which
super
was
hard.
used for about 10 laps
Yeah.
across its entire life.
At Silverstone
Yeah.
in practice.
Yeah.
That's like,
I think I remember Hulkenberg going, because it was like the dark blue one, but it was
yeah,
slick,
so
so not
it
the
looked
wet.
like a wet, but wasn't.
Yeah, so what, that's 8?
7.
7. And now we've got 6.
But they just seem harder in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
So, I mean, I get Pirelli's concerns are obviously they don't want to see their tyres exploding because that's
Yes.
obviously bad for the company. But you do, like, you can't be. I know they resurfaced the track and that does help with tyre life, that the track is now like smooth as anything, and obviously that doesn't cause graining. But this is the second race in a row now where we've had a one-stop strategy where we've had drivers start on the medium. We've seen a safety car, a red flag, and then they've gone onto the hards. Obviously in Australia, we then had all the drama, but that's out of the question for like normal, like what would normally happen. So, I mean, what can they do? Because the tyres, you'd have to say the tyre strategy was just part of the race that did sort of cause the death of anything interesting in the Baku in 2023.
Yeah, I think like when it comes to tyres, there's always going to be the debate of how much you're willing to compromise safety for actual like entertainment. So I feel like that's always going to be slightly iffy. But if I was to make one change, I think getting rid of the fact that you don't have to use the same set of compounds you qualified into Q3 for at the start of the race. I think getting rid of that kind of caused a bit of a blunder. I feel like you'd have more strategy options available if you mandated it to the fact that like if you got through, maybe even to Q2 as well, if you got through to Q2 and you didn't get to Q3, you'd have to start on that compound, or if you got through into Q3, you'd have to start on that compound you started off in, like to get you into Q3 in the first place. I feel like that did cause a bit of shake-ups last year, and some starting on mediums, some starting on softs if you're just outside the top 10. And it kind of opens up to just, rather than everyone just kind of starting on the mediums with 1 or 2 on the hards, it kind of gives you that disparity in the grid to begin with. So even if in Baku, like we had that safety car, say some did start off on the softs, some started off on the mediums that they qualified on, you'd still probably have seen, with the rate that the softs fell off, the softs would have pitted much before the safety car started. You'd start to see them come through, and then the mediums started to pit. You'd see a bit more of a shake-up overall. So I feel like bringing that rule back might actually be beneficial overall.
Yeah, well, that's an idea. Maybe mandatory 2-stop strategies that you have to use all of the compounds, because I guess if you're bringing 3 compounds, surely it makes sense to use them all during the race.
Yeah, but I think F1 are also on this. That's good for the environment.
Sustainability.
Let's save the
Yeah.
planet, which is great. Don't get
No,
me
that
wrong.
is great.
But and they're not going to want to go. Oh, let's use as much rubber and things as possible. I mean, when they get a sustainable fuel, maybe we can look at refueling again, perhaps when it's not bad and they're not just burning excess fuel. Maybe that can be something they revisit when it's not bad for the environment. I think a mandatory 2-stop could work, but I think everyone would just copy everyone again. You'd probably see just like a 3-lap stint on the softs at the end for everyone to go for the fastest lap or something silly like that.
Or maximum fuel allowance over a race, but you can put it in whenever you like.
Okay.
You've got 100 kgs, but they don't have to all be in the car at the start. Because I think the refueling issue was safety.
Yeah.
There was lots of hoses being dragged down pit lanes.
Well, bring back engine modes as well.
Bring back parking
Bring back-
modes.
Bring back the
It's
Parking
the
mode
only,
down
it's
the
the
street,
only
please.
thing that will help Mercedes. I think refueling is an idea, because as long as you make it explicitly clear to teams that if you mess up on, like, say if you send your car too early, then there's going to be like severe penalties to make it clear that safety aspect isn't something to be compromised on. But even now we've got the lights and stuff, surely you can have like sensors and things in the fuel cap where if the fuel nozzle isn't out of the car, the light isn't going to go off.
Yeah.
Like would that not work?
Yeah. I don't. Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, they are striving to make pit stops more safer anyway,
Yeah.
right? We're trying to make it more mechanical. So I feel like if they're going on that route anyway and trying to make the pit stop safer, I feel like trying to bring back refueling wouldn't be too hard to implement, as you say, with what we're currently doing now. So
Because nothing, it's never going to be 100% safe. We've seen incidents in the pit lane even post refueling.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, refueling would offer that element of strategy. Maybe you have to qualify on the fuel you have, or you have to start with the fuel you qualify on.
yeah,
So that's sort of like the early 2000s
Yeah,
strategy.
That would work really well.
And then as long as you just mandate you've got 100 kilos of fuel to use from quali to quali and the race.
Yeah.
Or like maybe add a bit, because obviously we're including quali here.
Yeah, well, the FIA check everything, so you can say, okay, you check how much they've got at the start of the qualifying session. You say, okay, this is how much you've got. You're allowed this much. Well,
Yeah.
this much for quality, or you keep that separate. You say, at the start of the race, this is how much food you've got.
Yeah.
Full. Cars have to be empty, and you have that for the race, and that's it. And they still have to have so much in the car. I don't see why that's an issue. I mean, in terms of safety, you look at IndyCar, they still do it.
Yeah.
And it means if you have the extra pit stop, you have less fuel because you're stopping more frequently, and it just adds a whole new kind of dimension.
And there aren't how many issues? I haven't seen any IndyCar issue, or as many IndyCar issues. I mean, we've sold F1. We'll introduce refueling, because if Pirelli aren't going to compromise with their tyres, and they don't seem to be wanting to, then it's you're going to have to look to other ideas. And with the increased safety, with the increased sort of electronic nature of pit stops, refueling perhaps could be reintroduced.
Probably.
Have we sold F1?
yeah,
we sold
yeah.
F1.
we sold it.
I think so.
it.
Yeah,
Done.
definitely sold it. Done.
Yeah, this is why we should be in charge.
Exactly.
We'll brainstorm some sprint
Yeah.
ideas.
Yeah.
It'd be great because you just see Alex Albon just on full fuel for the whole
Entire
race.
race,
Anyway.
yeah.
He just wouldn't change. He would just be there with his hard tyres on, get to lap 50,
Yeah.
hit, and be done.
Well, it's back in the day with the trolley trains, because Trulli would always qualify well, start on high
Start on
fuel,
fuel.
and then
Hold
just,
everyone.
Hold everyone up.
we need a 2023 trolley to drive around, just holding everyone up, and that's what we can have.
Well, we already have Albon for that.
Yeah,
Albon's
Albon.
already ready and prepped.
There was
Or
someone
anyone-
yesterday, I think, as well, wasn't there? It was
Yeah.
Hulkenberg just having everyone up for ages.
No, it's Ocon.
Ocon, yeah.
It's
Günther
Ocon.
Steiner
Yeah,
got so pissed off at it.
Gunther Steiner made it really clear it wasn't Hulkenberg.
I bet he did.
Yeah.
And speaking of Ocon, and speaking of safety,
what
a segue that was. But yeah, so Ocon and Hulkenberg, as we mentioned, started on the hard tyres right from the start of the race, didn't pit under the safety car, were running into lap 30, into lap 40, hoping obviously for another safety car or a red flag, essentially getting a free pit stop in the process, but didn't come in the end. Hulkenberg pitting on lap 50. That wasn't really the issue. It was Ocon pitting on lap 51, and in quite a severe oversight of judgment, no one seemed to realise that. And photographers were out in the pit lane. Red Bull had crossed the pit lane to obviously go celebrate Checo Perez's win, and Ocon came very close to hitting with his car quite a few people. I mean, it's one thing I really found interesting about it was that even all the commentators realised, like Ted realised, Crofty and Karoon realised, and it was like it was like watching an accident about to play out in real time rather than seeing one, maybe the aftermath of one. And it was really scary to see, wasn't it?
It was like it was shocking to watch more than anything else. It's like you see everybody on the stage, you see literally everybody in the pit lane, and all you know, you got Ocon zooming in at 100 miles an hour. Then obviously, yes, he's got to brake to 50 miles an hour, but 50 miles an hour is still a very fast speed.
That's what I think we miss out on in F1 sometimes. Like the pit lane limit is 50 miles an hour, That's like you do 50 miles an hour in a car. That's really quick.
Yeah.
And I think it wasn't so much on on the feed from the camera sort of above the pit lane, but when you look at his onboard, how quickly he's going and how close he is to hitting like quite a few people, that's the really concerning aspect.
Yeah, the onboard was quite scary. Like they were very close to being hit. I mean, I'm slightly surprised he didn't slow down more.
That's what I was thinking.
That was my first thought. Was like, you're still going. Don't get me wrong. You're going to finish last anyway because it's the last lap and you're pitting now. Just slow down anyway. It was quite, from the FIA's point of view, you're now investigating yourself for like the second time in 6 months after Suzuka. Even Crofty realised he had to do a pit stop still.
Yeah.
And like that should be concerning if you've got people in the pit lane and someone has to do a pit stop. It was just ridiculous to have so many people there.
It was just no one. It's like no one in charge realised, and I think everyone or like people on comms and things like that, they sort of just assume the people in charge would realise because it makes logical sense that if a car hasn't pitted at the start of lap 50 and legally by the rules has to pit, that they're gonna be coming in on the next lap, but it seemed like no one realised.
Yeah, it did seem kind of strange, and you brought up a good point in the sense that like the commentators knew exactly what was going to happen. It was spoken about, and I'm surprised because in the interview, Ocon pointed out that he was never told about it in the first. Like he got to that point and he kind of noticed it. So, I guess you could kind of say is it also the responsibility of the team side to kind of like point it out to, or like kind of like make him aware of it? Like at the end of the day, like it's the fumble that the FIA made that allowed this to happen. Because I think Ted brought up the sense that like there's effectively two like access gates. One which is where F1 personnel, like team like personnel, are allowed to come out of, and one where FIA licensed photographers and media people are allowed to come out of. And it's the one with the photographers and media people that were coming out with their like photo tower structure that was kind of in breach. And obviously in that scenario it is the marshals and the FIA in charge of that kind of access gate that should be looked into, which they are looking into. But it also did seem surprising to me that the team, as much as they probably couldn't have influenced that decision in trying to clear the area, but I'm surprised no word was kind of passed over of how they didn't kind of realize such an incident was happening at the same time, because they do also like monitor like what's being said over like the broadcast and everything as well.
I mean, I just think there was that assumption that they'd know, or there was that assumption that the FIA would know that Ocon still had to come in and would send out a message like, I know we normally get, they'll say like, oh no, I know we'll normally get out into the pits one lap early, but let's hold off for a little bit because we've still got our car to come in. And this isn't the first time we've had this issue. We've been mentioning Alex Albon a lot and his mastery at keeping tyres alive, but back in Australia last year you had people in the pit lane, as obviously they weren't in the in sort of the pit road where the cars were going down, but they were in the pit lane as Albon was driving past to go out onto his last lap. And you almost wonder why do they need to be there so early? They've got an entire lap and a slower lap at that where Perez is coming round. He's obviously celebrating with his team. Why can't that be the lap where like teams and or photographers and drivers and teams go out into the pit lane?
I mean, I don't know. I don't see why not. I think it's just the fact that they were there in the first place. There is no excuse to justify anything. Just the blatant lack of like sort of safety awareness they had is, and that too. This is an organisation like the FIA, and this we've seen a few incidents now since Suzuka, and I think I will say Suzuka is still the worst one yet. And it kind of shows that they're not really learning completely from their lessons.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I understand that F1 is a ridiculously massive global operation. The amount of sort of logistics and everything you need to sort out, from everything from cars to the teams themselves to building the garages, marshalling, stewarding, to all the PR stuff, to even organising podium celebrations. I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg, but how much of a large organization and the logistical sort of costs and planning that F1 needs in order to be the absolute mega sport it is today. And obviously hats off to the way they've done it, because pretty much the operation of the way they've been almost immaculate with how well they've organized things. But it's just like, it's small things like this that they fumble on so often, we've seen the consequences of these little fumbles. I mean, the tractor into the back of Suzuka, the exact same thing happened. Scenario happened where that caused an actual death, and the last F1 driver to actually die from a race. The similar same situation happened. There's no excuse really.
And Will, it's clear that they haven't learned from having people in the pit lane, because we saw it last year and we've seen it again this week. So when do they learn? Is it when something actually really bad happens that the FIA do take pause? But you obviously don't want that to happen. You think that they should be learning from their mistakes sooner.
I think that's the scary thing. Like, they've had so many chances, like, especially when you can see everyone's one stopping, you always get that one car that goes on the last lap in these sorts of races. What do you need to do? What do you need to happen to kind of say, we need to change this? Like you said, why does it have to be while the race is still running? It's like, you don't have to have camera people in taking pictures.
Yeah.
I get that it's their job, but ultimately they can't do their job if they're hit by a car.
Yeah.
So you can't just have these photographers. I'm sure a lot of them are really interested in the sport, but you've got people that probably don't know, and they're just like, oh, there's probably not going to be anything coming. Why do you need to have these people that aren't necessarily aware of what's going on because they haven't got the TV feed while they're down there?
Yeah.
You need someone to say, no, stay where you are for this extra lap, and kind of put your foot down.
Well, not even that, just wait till the first driver crosses the line. And there's no reason that they need to. Is 20-30 seconds really going to make that much of a difference, especially when you're going to be waiting for the first driver to come around for 3 or 4 minutes, because they're going to necessarily be going slower.
No, I think the only example where you might say, you know what, fair enough, they need to get in there is Spa.
Yeah,
go back round. But that's it. They've got one of the longest tracks on the calendar to get everyone round. The field wasn't exactly that.
It wasn't even spread. I think one car got lapped, and that was, I think Bottas was the only car that got lapped.
No, it would have been fine for them to wait until everyone had at least finished the race. You don't need to see Perez driving down the pit lane. That's not your shot. You get it when he's in park firm anyway.
In front of that number
or
behind the number.
You can stay there. You don't need to go out into the pit lane to watch these cars. You never see that shot on the front of articles. So what's the need for it to be there?
It's just baffling that something so clearly silly can be allowed to happen. And is it F1 losing sight of the fact that it is at the end of the day, the sport is still taking place, and the sport is still reasonably and exceptionally dangerous, because we've mentioned 50 miles an hour, but again, we think to a car going 50 miles an hour on a motorway or on an A road or something. If that hits something, it's going to do a lot of damage. And F1 cars, they're quite low down. They're going to be if they hit something, it's going to cause a lot of damage. And it's why? It's just a question of why was this allowed to happen? Why didn't no one in charge realise that this would potentially be a problem?
I don't know why. I'm trying to think of a reason why, but I just genuinely you can't think why something like this would happen, unless it was just utter obliviousness.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. But it's it's just how it just. I mean, look, I get F1 has become generationally safer than it has been even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
The safety bands we've had ever since we've had stuff like the Halo come in, so the crash structure, the hands device. Obviously, in that, like, as a whole, F1 has become so much safer than it used to be, but then you can't deny the fact that F1 is still one of the most dangerous sports in the world.
Yeah.
That fact that, yes, even with all this stuff, yes, we seen these sort of 50G crashes. We saw Fernando Alonso back in Australia. We saw 2021 the Silverstone crash.
Or like even last year of Silverstone as well with Guan Yu Zhou.
Yeah, Guan Yu Zhou was up with a roll hoop, and that was probably one of the probably most horrifying of the three I mentioned.
Yeah, it's the most, obviously the most
like
dramatic.
But it's like, and even to like Marcus Ericsson when the
DRS failed in Monza.
It was in Monza, yeah, and the car just like, he could literally do nothing about it, but the car just veered left, smashed into a concrete wall, and then all four of them pretty much got out without harm.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, obviously, not to mention the big one of them all, Romain Grosjean's crash.
That's just testament to how safe F1 has become.
And how relatively unscared, I mean, of course he had massive burns on his hands, but it's like, how relatively unscared he come up from an incident is so bad as that.
Even if you had that incident 5 or 6 years ago, there's almost no way that he would have survived.
Oh yeah, 100%. The Halo completely saved so many people's lives. But then there's also the fact there's all the other bits where you got people in the pit lane, people getting collided by the thing, and obviously we see the mechanics getting hit by the car when they're slowing down, even at 10-20 miles an hour. You can see how much it hurts. It's.
Was it Stroll in Imola in 2020?
Yeah, and then there's so many problems. Yes, it's not just the big bits; it's all the small bits as well, because it's the small bits that cause the most damage at the end of the day. So,
well, hopefully they.
I mean, they will.
Yeah.
I think this is something that they'll have to look at. But
do you think it's just because it was so prominent? Like they cut to, like sometimes when you see incidents like that, we only see them after the race. Like for example, the Albon incident, it was brought up on Twitter a few hours after the race, but this was so prominent in that it was on the live feed that we almost saw this incident happen. Do you think that will play a role in terms of their response?
Obviously, if something is publicized, it's always gonna cause some kind of mass hysteria. But I think just because the fact that it was broadcasted shouldn't take away from just how bad of a situation it was. I feel like, if anything, it is probably for the best that it was shown, because I think I don't want these kind of issues to kind of go like hidden and kind of under the rug and like an internal thing. I feel like it does need to be made aware that F1, as big of a logistics sport it is, how they managed to coordinate like 23 races, and they can do all of these things, have these like big visionary like images and like visions that they have, but still these like fundamentally on the whole scale of things minor inconveniences that they just kind of can't iron out. All those small things will eventually add up, and I feel like it's important to note that like, as safe as it is getting, there is still a lot of improvement to be made. So I think if anything, the publicity was only a good thing to kind of bring this like up to attention for everyone.
Yeah, and hopefully they do take note of it and do make changes, even for next week as well in Miami. Are there any other? This race was so boring.
There is nothing to talk about.
There were 13 overtakes, and before the show we managed to list off all 13 of them.
Yeah.
I think we got 13.
We got through them,
There's probably one we didn't. We probably forgot, like Norris overtook Piastri at some point. I don't know.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Piastri apparently was ill the
Yeah.
entire
Yeah,
weekend.
kudos to him.
Apparently
Apparently he survived the whole weekend on 4 pieces of toast.
Yeah.
I can't survive a day on 4 pieces of toast, and I'm not driving an F1 car for hours on end. Now, he has to. I feel like he almost has to be driving the weekend for that. I mean, who would you give? Maybe let's do driver of the day for the race. Who would you give driver of the day?
I'll still give Paris, but Piastri, I think, just because of the fact he survived this weekend, the way he drove, and he actually, to be fair, I mean, I know he didn't get a point to finish, but still, a solid drive this.
Where did he finish?
11.
I think he was 11th. I think in the sprint he was quite close to the points as well.
I think it was 9th.
He was at 9th or something, but like, and actually the McLaren's not the fastest car in the grid as well.
No, apparently their upgrades have worked.
The upgrades are definitely working. Oh yeah, but we're still waiting for Imola where the big upgrades are going to come.
Everyone's upgrades are arriving. Well, who would you give?
I think Perez definitely has to be up there. I think being slightly biased, I think Charles Leclerc had a very good weekend to be able to stick it on pole twice. And he crashed in the second one.
It's Leclerc in Baku. He's
all
magically attracted to that.
And I think all the tyres had gone by that point anyway. But I think he had a very strong weekend, and Ferrari in general had a better weekend. But I think Perez was just so
Sides was a
dominant.
bit washed.
Yeah, I put in, we had our group chat, someone was put, how is Sainz so far behind? And I just put it was a skill issue. I just don't, it's not his best track.
He said he doesn't like it in the past.
No, I don't think, I might be wrong, but street tracks in general, there's no gravel, so he doesn't have anything to drive for, I guess.
So what? It's the pinnacle of a street track with gravel. That's where he becomes unstuck.
That's what we need. We need
Well,
just
Australia and Canada.
Yeah. Any?
I think driver of the day. I wouldn't change it. I'd keep it with Perez. Initially, I was gonna give it to Leclerc, but I think just Perez had a more cohesive weekend if we are looking at it on the whole. But Piastri does deserve a very honourable mention.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Just speaking on the Carlos Sainz thing, I still can't get behind how his qualifying lap was 8/10 slower than Leclerc's in the same car. I'm sorry, I can't look past that if I'm honest.
Yeah, it wasn't. Well, Leclerc's got pole at the last 3 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. I was trying to find the driver with the most poles at a track they'd never won at, but I can work out how to look for the stat.
Yeah.
Disappointing. I think all of those shouts are good. Piastri, obviously, a bit of an under the radar shout.
Am I right in saying that Perez is the first repeat winner at Baku as well?
He is. First repeat. Red Bull won Baku, they've won it 5 times.
Yeah.
And
They're very strong on this track.
And I think Ferrari have got the most poles at the track.
Ferrari have never won.
So they got pole in 2018, I think, with Vettel, and then all 3 obviously.
I think Leclerc would have had it the year he
had it,
crashed, probably.
Was it 2021?
2021.
That's why he didn't get 20. I was wondering why he didn't get 2019, and it said no ties.
Because he was stupid.
Yeah.
Yes, he was.
So Leclerc's had it the last 3, but then obviously Ferrari have had no straight line speed. All Red Bull have just been insanely quick.
Leclerc and Baku is a very Jekyll and Hyde performance.
It's basically like him at Monaco. He just can't win. It's just he's good. He's great in qualifying, and then he's just
something just knocks him down.
I'm still convinced it's a curse. I'm sorry.
I think it's
No, it is. No, I think it's more or less confirmed that he has a curse.
Yeah, he does.
No,
it's called Ferrari.
No, but Sainz has been fine. He's been chilling there. 21, he was alright.
He was on the podium in
21.
He
came
and
second.
and in 22.
Yeah, he had a better race than because he decided to stay out rather than come in.
Yeah. So Piastri is a good shout because obviously 4 pieces of post and driving a lot of F1 sessions. Don't know how you can do that. Perez and Leclerc, very good performances. I'll throw out. This is again being biased. Lewis Hamilton had a fairly decent weekend for a car that was that thing may as well have a sail on the back of it. That's how draggy it is.
Yeah, it was a solid weekend. I think another one as well. Yuki Tsunoda had in a car that's been quite bad this year. He was unlucky in SQ1, but other than that, he had a very solid drive again. Picked up another point. He's had a better start to the season than he has in previous years.
Well, especially compared to his teammate, who is awful.
Yes,
actually.
I think you can blame Matt Gallagher for Yuki Tsunoda.
His predictions have been on fire. He's the worst driver.
Unbelievable.
Well, I mean, De Vries. I want to talk about De Vries quickly. Surely Liam Lawson is on the radar to replace him already.
I mean, as well, I think you had Iwasa as the F2 points leader as well, so that you got that, and I think
because Iwasa's currently leading F2, isn't he?
Not
anymore.
Poor
Porsche
Shares now, because Iwasa had a dreadful weekend.
That's true. Yeah.
Shout to Ollie Behrman, by the way.
Clean sweep.
First ever F2 clean sweep. I think the first time since Hulkenberg in 2009 when it was called GP2.
GP2.
Yeah, I think Piquet did it.
Something like that. But no, he's under a lot of pressure, but I think he's also on a loan from Mercedes anyway.
Behrman?
No, not De Vries.
I was gonna say, like,
Yeah.
I think he's technically on loan there, so he's still like a Mercedes driver. So for him, it's like if Hamilton's potentially retiring in a year or two, you don't want to have this dreadful year.
But surely because they go from Mick maybe.
See, I think
Norris.
I think Norris goes to Mercedes.
I think Norris goes anywhere that's not McLaren.
Yeah.
Maybe Aston Martin.
Yeah. Any other interesting drives this weekend?
No.
No.
No. This race was
It
so
was
dull.
so dull.
Yeah.
It was so bad.
Yeah. I can't think.
Can we just say a big shout out to Fernando Alonso's epic dive bomb down Sainz on the restart?
That was good.
That was,
Yeah.
I
Pretty
think,
sure
my
Fernando
favourite.
Alonso has become
So good.
Lance Stroll's adoptive father.
Oh yeah, that's
brake
probably the
balance-
one thing I haven't talked
the
about
brake
yet.
balance stuff.
No, and then the best bit is Stroll
Stroll
falls
so
down in
bad.
the last
He
corner.
messed up, yeah.
What?
That
And
was
the
so
last
funny.
proper corner of the track,
Yeah.
but.
I mean, that was the only way Hamilton was getting past.
Yeah.
It honestly, it was like the Ferrari and the Mercedes were the same speed, even with slipstream.
Yeah.
I
And
know,
then
it's-
Hamilton
it's
gets
so
zero.
good.
Could not
get-
it was that was just Imola 2020, 2020, not Imola last year vibes completely.
Yeah.
That Mercedes is so
It's so
draggy.
draggy,
Yeah.
and they can't do corners either. It's
No.
not a very good car.
To be fair, you can look after the tyres.
We'll have to wait till Monaco. But
Yeah.
Even then, I don't think
No,
they've got
Imola. No, we just need to wait till Imola.
oh god.
Imola, I'm sorry.
It's never going to get better. But that isn't the next race coming up. The Monaco isn't, Imola isn't. We're coming on to the Miami Grand Prix, second race or second running of the race. Last year,
Alright.
it was
Meh.
meh.
Yeah.
This year,
Well,
is it going to be any different?
hopefully they don't show the crowd as much.
Oh gosh, yes.
That I think Miami last year had this by far the second worst camera direction. First worst, the worst obviously being Monaco
It's
because
always
it's
Monaco.
always the worst.
Have you seen they might not actually, like, Monaco is going to be affected by all these strikes, or could be affected by all these strikes that are going on in France.
Oh.
We might actually get competent TV direction if the actual TV directors go on strike. But no, Miami, it's just a bit bland.
I think I have good vibes for this one. I think on the whole the grid seems to be fairly closer together in terms of gaps between cars, excluding the Red Bull of course.
Yeah.
But like I just feel like they're just, it might seem like less of a DRS kind of like train issue on the back straight. I think I feel like there will be a little bit more excitement.
I still think it should be an evening race.
Yeah. I
Surely
think it's
so
sunset in
good.
Miami would
That'd
be,
be
look
amazing.
so much
Oh
better.
yeah, 100%.
I think we might get an interesting Ferrari Aston Martin battle.
Yeah.
Because Ferrari will have the speed I expect, but their tyres will just disintegrate. So you might get a close battle at the end, is what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. And then Mercedes will either be good or not
All
good.
bad, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
50-50.
Yeah. But do we want to go over our predictions
Yeah, we'll
for
go
Baku?
we'll go over the predictions from last week really
I
quickly.
think they weren't too bad. I know I think I almost
think-
nailed the podium.
Yeah, you almost did. It was just
I got Verstappen and Perez.
yeah,
the
you had
wrong way
Verstappen,
around.
Perez.
Are we banning Red Bull? Are we banning Red Bull podiums now?
Yes. No, we'll keep Perez.
Okay, we can keep.
We'll keep Perez for now.
You can, and you can put Verstappen not first.
Yeah.
That was a good
But
point.
then-
Unless it's a street race.
Yeah. Yeah. But then yeah. So if I go back, so it is. I had a 1 point lead, 15-14 coming into the predictions. So then if I go via the podium first, we both said Verstappen, Perez.
So 1 point. Oh no,
so
2 points.
so we both got 2 points from there. But then you said Leclerc, I said Alonso. So that will give you 5-2.
We sort of nailed that because Alonso
Yeah.
was fourth as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It was like what, 6/10.
That's how you know a race is boring, when we're like right.
Right.
Yeah. It's too predictable. Alright, and then so what we'll do, and then I'll say the first our 1 pointers. I said there'll be these 2 safety cars in the race, in the main race, by the way.
Yeah, only one.
But there was only one with thanks. Well, Nick DeVries is providing one of the very few forms of entertainment.
You know what? Actually, a lot of drivers got away with clonking,
Yeah.
clonking quite a few
Yeah.
barriers.
It's in the same corner. Lance
Yeah.
Stroll
Correct
careered
into it. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's
I
yonked
I was
into the side.
fine. And De Vries literally clips it with the most minimal contact and just goes straight
And then the steering
on.
arm just snaps
Yeah.
completely. Yeah.
Because that's why everyone was looking at the car and like, why can't you reverse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you look at the front left, it's just bent.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, then Will, you said there'll be these 2 quality red flags across both qualities.
I
the
did.
Sprint and the thing.
Well, there were 2 across the
Yeah.
first quali, and then
So-
Logan decided to plonk his rear on the barrier.
Yeah. So that means they'll give you up to 6-2.
6-2.
And then the 2-pointer. I said Verstappen out qualifies everyone by over 1 second, including Perez.
We didn't.
So then, he didn't get pole.
Yeah.
But yeah, 'cause I
Such a
didn't
good
count
driver.
for. Yeah, I didn't count on Ferrari being that quick.
Raw pace, he's
Everyone's slandering him for his pole to win conversion.
But I don't think a lot of it's his fault.
Because what years has he had a car where he theoretically could convert a pole into a win?
Last year,
2022.
2019.
Yeah. And then he got some in 2021. Not 2020, that car was
Yeah.
even beyond his
and
abilities.
even 2021, like apart from Monaco, I still
I
don't
think
think they
he-
stood a chance in
He got
Baku.
pole in Monaco
And he got
and
Baku.
pole in
Well,
Baku.
yeah.
That was
Was it?
incredible.
The
pole
Baku
In
position.
Yeah, that was
2021 Monaco
ridiculous.
was Leclerc, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but,
but
it,
it
but
didn't
it was a
count.
DNS, but so it didn't really count as a pole.
Yeah.
I think it
It did.
did
'cause
count
he-
as a
did-
pole,
did
but
ca-
it
but he
was a
didn't-
DNS.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
No, but Verstappen obviously didn't count as pole himself.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you got those, and then not last year. But was he in pole in France last year?
Yeah, he was. I think the only one I can see where he messed up was in France. Yeah,
The
where,
rest of them, just didn't have the speed.
yeah.
Like Miami
On
last year.
engine stuff.
Or was he on pole in Spain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and then
Yeah,
that was the
yeah,
first
yeah.
For the start of
Baku last
the
year.
the first
decline.
Yeah.
engine blow up.
Was he on pole in Monaco?
He was.
Yeah, he
but that
was.
That was
his
his
fault as
fault,
well.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's
Yeah,
he's either been compromised by Ferrari or Ferrari.
Ferrari.
Or him, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So,
then
what
your
we-
2-pointer was there'll be at any point after DRS activation there'll be 3 cars going one into a corner.
I don't think.
There wasn't.
Yeah.
That was not enough. So then neither of us got a 2-pointer.
That would have required overtaking.
Yeah.
Yes. And then the 3-pointer, you said there'll be at least four DNFs on the first lap in the main race, which
Solid
There was-
0.
there
There were a
was-
few, a bit of contact
Yeah.
I
at the
don't think
back.
there were 4 DNFs in the whole race, were
There
there?
was
There was
one.
one.
No,
There's
no,
the free.
two.
Oh no, 2. When
Good
did
job.
Joe?
Oh, he retired.
He retired.
and then my one, I said the McLaren outscored Alpine throughout the entire weekend.
They did.
Did they?
They
Yeah,
did.
they did.
Oh.
Because
Yeah, got
Norris
2
was
points.
9th, I think, in the main race.
Yeah. And he picked up some points.
Wait,
at
what?
the,
No one. They didn't pick
Did-
points up in the
Oh no, they
sprint.
didn't
So-
Because
Oh,
Piastri
okay.
was 10th.
It was just
Oh,
Aston
okay,
Ferrari,
yeah.
Mercedes.
Yeah.
Big 14.
Handle.
So yeah, by
Yeah.
2 points because an Alpine had an
2
absolute
to 0.
disaster.
That's such.
Alpine had the worst
the worst
weekend.
race they
They
could.
made
I don't think
McLaren in Bahrain look good.
I don't think Ocon had a. Ocon, I mean, when did he start?
Pit lane.
Pit lane.
Oh.
To yeah.
Yeah, they had a terrible. Gasly,
He's not talking
Gasly,
about it.
like fire, crash, sprint,
Sprint.
and then.
Just nowhere. And he pit like 4 times as well
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
race. So then that would add it to 6-5. Oh yeah, but then we also had our bonus castle section
No.
prediction, which
No.
neither happened.
Again, would have required something interesting to happen at this
No.
race.
No, I mean, just for context, I said Leclerc crashed into the castle section at
I
some
said-
point in the
I
weekend.
said someone would block the castle section.
Yeah.
It still baffles me how no one's done
They
that.
blocked it like.
I know. Even when they're like racing it, like
Yeah.
following each other, no one's got like
Yeah.
a little like
Look,
bit of oversteer or something and just gone.
it doesn't like. F1 drivers getting too good.
It's so
Like-
narrow.
Yeah.
Can't lie.
Back in
They're
the
all,
day,
like,
they were
they're all
terrible.
so reliable. There's the issue. Like no one, everyone knows there's so many like drivers that want to get in now. They're like, I don't want to mess up. I'd rather
Yeah.
just sit here.
This is where we need things to stop blowing up these days.
We need
Yeah.
a grid of Nick De Vries.
We do.
We wouldn't get any finishes.
De Vries and
No,
Latifi.
The freedom to take it.
I miss Latifi. He was old reliable.
Yeah.
You know
Fine,
what?
with
We
entertainment.
just need to give Maho Raganath in the seat in F1.
No.
We will
No,
That's where I draw the line.
Absolute.
Can't do that.
Brilliant.
No, I don't think it'll be entertainment. It'll just
Yeah.
be.
I don't
The
mind
question-
Mick Schumacher could come back. That make.
Yeah,
Going to start really angry.
Yeah.
We'll
Good
just,
start
we'll
angry,
just,
just
we'll just make
fight
another
someone.
Austrian angry. Just this time it'll be Toto. So what? That's I won
So
by
you're
1
1 point that weekend, which makes us tied on 20
Yeah,
points. So
19.
we have a nice little reset.
Right, top 3 in Miami.
So yeah. Do you wanna go?
Who's what? There's only really been one race. It's quite difficult to say who's
That was
good. You know what prediction we dare? I'm just going to mention this quickly. You know what prediction we should have thought about is awful Taylor Swift puns.
There was
Because
so
there were so many of
There
them.
was so many.
Yeah.
And the fact that he went like, I can't comment as well. Like,
Yeah,
he
it's like,
denied it,
bro.
nor confirmed it.
I love it. Alonso has moved into such a banter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That man. He's great.
I love it.
He's so competitive, but so funny at the same time. Whoever gave Alonso a TikTok account, he's like,
Well, I think they're
promoting.
sponsored by. I think he has to have one because I think him or Aston Martin are sponsored by TikTok.
Nice
Yeah.
one. Top three, can't do Verstappen win. I wouldn't, even if that restriction wasn't in place, I genuinely wouldn't, because I would probably go Perez.
Yeah, I was going to go Perez first as well.
Alright.
But then, I mean, we can keep both Perez first. That's
Yeah,
fine.
I'll be a bit more interesting. I'll go Perez, Alonso, Verstappen.
Okay. I'm going to go Perez first, Alonso third, and then my second place. I know we're talking about how they're a bit off the pace, but that's going to be. Oh, well, I'm not saying another team, but that's because I put them in my. That's going to be my 2-point prediction. So I'm going to put Lewis Hamilton to be second. As a very, very. I'm going to do.
You know,
I'm going to go very much out the park here.
you know Lewis's this is obviously his longest winner streak, and it's longer than Max Verstappen's
Verstappen's,
ever.
yeah.
Which is quite
It's
funny.
crazy.
I wouldn't be optimistic. I don't
No.
think Lewis had. I think Miami last year was one of Lewis's poorer races as well. If I remember.
Miami, I think he got.
I think,
I think it was one of the races he got ruined by the safety car. I
maybe.
think he pitted just before the Gasly Norris incident
okay,
happened,
maybe.
and
Actually-
Russell, who had started in 11th,
That's,
managed
yeah,
to
that's
jump
right.
him.
Actually, I'm going to pull back. I'm not going to go Hamilton. I'm changing my 2-pointer. I'm going to switch Hamilton for Leclerc.
So I've gone.
Let's go.
So wait, I've gone
I'll take-
Perez.
Yeah, I'll take that.
I've gone Perez, Alonso, Verstappen, and you've gone Hamilton. Wait, no, not
Perez,
Hamilton.
Leclerc.
Perez, Leclerc.
No,
He was
Verstappen at all.
Verstappen was your third, right?
You know what we should do? We should pick one at a time, and the other person can't use the
Yeah.
driver. We'll do that next time. We'll
Yeah,
just
we'll do it.
alternate.
One of you
gets
Yeah,
Verstappen.
only one
Yeah.
of you gets Verstappen.
Yeah.
But then only one of us gets Perez.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
actually, it's not a
just
bad
go,
idea.
just go Alonso.
Alonso,
and Leclerc.
Yeah.
Well, maybe Mercedes if they ever
Yeah.
get. No.
So your
Not
podium
100%.
was
Mine was Perez, Alonso, Verstappen.
fair. Okay, that works.
Yeah.
And then what do you want to do?
Oh, 1 point prediction.
I've got mine if you want.
I would, for my 1 point, I'm going to go with something happens that is wildly American. Like,
Okay.
just something in the weekend. Like, they interview a celebrity who clearly doesn't want to be there. There's someone trying to swim
Yeah.
in the fake arena.
Oh.
There's a police escort again. They get cowboy hats and.
Yeah.
Cowboy hats?
Yeah,
no,
American
no,
football
cowboy.
helmets.
So,
American
yeah.
football helmet. They were quite fun.
I
They
think it was
were.
cool. I
They
think
were.
I think it added something quite nice to it.
Yeah, it was quite unique.
It's
Yeah.
just American.
Yeah. Something. This may be the most slam dunk 1 point I do all year.
Yeah.
Guns
Something.
salute as they come onto the bench.
Yeah. Something wildly American.
Something's Florida, man.
Yeah.
What did we get it into FP1?
Yeah.
Sorry for-
Actually, we've got a real light. We've got a Florida man.
man.
No.
That'll be it. That's
Fine,
not
I'll-
bad. Florida
yeah.
man gets points.
If you're gonna go slam dunk 1 point, I'll make my slam point
Yeah.
6 different constructors in Q3.
Wait.
So.
Oh.
6
Yeah.
different constructors.
Yeah, so you get the
in
big
Q3.
four and then what?
And then
Big four and then
McLaren, maybe Alpine,
or
yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
Alpha Tauri.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll
so,
go for that.
so that'll make mine a slam dunk 1 pointer as well.
It
Is it
seems
like-
when
I
it
don't- is it- I don't
seems
think
it's
it
when
is.
like
I don't know,
Alpine.
because I think there'll be one team.
That might get
That
both
would be
in.
really
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Are
but-
you saying 6 plus or
If
exactly
6 plus,
6?
6
Okay.
plus.
It's actually feeling better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay,
That's true.
my 2 pointer.
I'm going science does not get points.
Ooh.
Shut up.
Yeah, no, he's gonna bin it
Oh.
for something stupid.
I know. Thing is, I love science, but it's like
I
science is
do.
having an absolute stinker of a
Start
season
with
so
I
far.
will go for. I don't. This is probably maybe even a borderline 3, but I'll go low. For my 2 pointer, I'll go Logan Sargent scores his first points in F1. Florida man.
That was gonna be
Wow.
that was gonna be my 3-pointer.
I'm,
Okay.
I'm stolen it.
Florida
I
man.
got in there. I got in there early with the 2
Okay.
pointer.
Okay.
So Logan Sargent, and I'll do my 3-pointer because obviously I've just nicked
Yeah.
yours, and I can't think of one. There will be there'll be 1 or 0 DNFs. So less than 2 DNFs.
Okay.
I just think it's Miami. Nothing happens. Yeah, less
Okay,
than
yeah.
2 DNFs from the race.
Yeah, maybe.
Because I'm jinxing it. So
When all the
seven-
Something happens.
Yeah, yeah.
Everyone just explodes.
I'll go because I wanted to go for something like a Sergeant, something American competitor. I'm just gonna go for Haas double points
Ooh.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's a good 3-pointer.
because obviously it's the first American race and they're the only American team.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So
I
we've
don't-
got it. So my 1-pointer, something wildly American happens.
Yeah.
2-pointer, Logan Sargent scores points, and 3-pointer to 1 or less DNFs.
Yeah, mine is there is at least 6 people in the 6 constructors in Q3.
Yep.
My 2-pointer is Signs not having a point to finish, and then a third. My 3-pointer is a double Haas point to finish.
Is there a special Florida 5-pointer we can do? A Florida man 5-pointer, something just absolutely crazy.
Say
happens.
Yeah. I'm just thinking.
Logan Sargent wins. Florida man wins.
Florida man wins in Florida.
F1 continues race whilst there's a thunderstorm or something like that.
That's right. I've checked the weather forecast. No thunderstorms on the horizon.
Yeah, it's looking bone
unfortunately.
dry, doesn't it?
What? Are they allowed to race in thunder? No, they can't because
No,
of
they're not.
Malaysia.
Malaysia.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and back in the day.
Yeah,
I missed
Kenny
that.
eating ice cream.
Yeah.
Oh, 2009, what a time to be alive.
I know.
I was 7. How old? You're the year below.
No, I was 7.
Oh wait.
Oh, you know, you're
Yeah,
you're
I'm
both.
30.
Oh.
We're the younger
We're
ones.
the younger ones.
Yeah.
7 years old. What a time! That was a time to be alive. No responsibilities. Not
Exactly.
right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that has been Baku. I'm surprised how long we spoke about that.
Yeah.
It was really nice of FIA to do something stupid that we could
We can
talk
talk
for
about.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
But no, we'll be back next week to talk about the Miami Grand Prix, which I am tentatively looking forward to.
Yeah.
One thing I'm really looking forward to is that it's an even. I love races in the American
Yeah.
continent because they're evening races.
Yeah.
Evening races are
Chill.
such.
8:30
nice.
start.
Baku was good because it was 12 o'clock, a 12 o'clock race, but I still feel like it's early enough in the morning, but not too early in the morning.
Yeah.
2 o'clock's a bit of a
Yeah.
terrible time.
What do you guys think is going to be Red Bull's special livery? It's their first
Are
one.
they
Oh
did-
yeah,
they're
it's
doing one.
They're doing the
Delivery.
fans one, right?
That-
Yeah,
that-
submissions.
It's right. It's
They
Miami.
know-
It's Miami. But if you mess up that livery,
I think it's gonna be
you should be disqualified from
color
the championship.
paradise. I think it's when
I hate that they're doing it on just the side pods though.
Sidepods.
Just do the whole car.
Didn't McLaren do one on the sidepods last year for Miami?
Probably something. Little.
Oh wait, was that the weird pink and?
No, that was Singapore and Japan.
Yeah, I think McLaren did a special.
They did something, but it wasn't.
Miami livery.
So did
massively-
Mercedes, right? With the little weird little
Yeah.
fin.
Oh
things.
no, we do not go near Mercedes and one-off liveries. It's not against it. But no,
Especially the was it 70th anniversary livery or something like
I
that.
got the German.
Did
Yeah,
you
yeah,
see
yeah.
the Did you see the F1 video they put out where it's pit stops but they get progressively
Possibly
longer?
Valtteri Bottas.
The last two are both Mercedes.
Yeah.
No, the last one's like Ferrari. Like it's
No.
an 80-second pit stop. Oh no, it's like 180, like
Yeah.
150 double stack or something. You know, in that race they still got a 1-2.
Probably.
Yeah,
I
because I
wouldn't put it
think
past them.
I think they put on everyone else was on wets. They put on inters, and when
Yeah.
the track it was in Malaysia, so their track dries up like
Yeah.
anything.
That doesn't surprise me.
And they got a 1-2 after that, but nothing will ever beat the 42-hour, 15-minute pit stop. I should have put another tyre on just for the meeting.
Yeah.
But no, we'll be back next week to talk about Miami. Thank you to Ini, thank you to Will, and thank you as ever to Chinmay
Thank you.
for coming on. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think there's anything else to say.
No,
Cool.
I think as usual, come to Planet this Sunday. Watch the F1.
I might do actually. Oh
Come-
no, that's sort of prime. That's prime.
Have you not
essay
been
time.
to the Clown
I
Day?
went for Bahrain.
Yeah. I remember you did.
Yeah, it was quite funny.
Pain.
It was. I had to.
Yeah.
It's Leclerc.
It was too easy.
It was too easy. But no, hopefully, well, not for Will's sake. Hopefully, Leclerc does finish the race in a good position. For my sake, hopefully, Hamilton finishes the race in a good position. Chinmay just wants Red Bull 1-2.
No, I don't want to. Actually, no, I just want Perez to win.
Perez win.
I want Perez to win the championship.
I just
Leclerc
want
on
Perez.
the Hamilton podium, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
I'd take Hamilton with Claire Alonso. Just
Yeah,
Hamilton.
I'll
just want Hamilton.
I'll take Perez.
Mercedes
and
pass
Perez.
for
I just want Red Bull on the podium.
Yeah.
I just don't want Red Bull to be on the podium.
Well, not all of our wishes can come true, but
No.
hopefully some of them do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.